22 years old back in 2008 and had been driving trucks ever since I graduated college a few months back. I can't say I had a passion for hauling scaffolding for development companies, but I had to pay off my student loans somehow. Most trips went by in a blur. I would pick up the materials at the manufacturer and then spend the next week driving to my drop-off location. Then I would turn around and do it all over again. Nothing could have prepared me for the trip I would be taking from Seattle to North Carolina. It was a cold Monday morning, and I was spending it bundled up in my truck cab, waiting for the scaffolding loading to be done so I could get out on the road. I had 3 days to get this truck across almost 12 states, which meant I wouldn't be getting much sleep for the next couple of nights. I planned to stop in Wyoming and Missouri on my way to North Carolina to try and get at least a few hours of sleep. Sleeping in the truck cab was pretty difficult because of how cramped it was, and I usually ended up tossing and turning until eventually deciding to just keep driving and get to my destination as quickly as possible. Finally, the truck was loaded and I was ready to go. I put my destination in my GPS and hopped on I-90, settling in for the long drive ahead. The first day was relatively uneventful. Besides the typical stops I took every few hours to use the bathroom and fill up on coffee and snacks. I slept on the side of the highway in Cheyenne the first night, barely getting more than an hour of rest before rolling off my bunk and strapping back into my seat and continuing my drive. 12 hours later, I was now in Missouri and nearing my next rest spot as I felt my eyes beginning to weigh heavier and heavier. I usually never had trouble staying awake, but something about the mist that had slowly rolled onto the road, combined with the warm AC, made me feel cozy, and I could feel myself hitting a mental wall, and I knew I needed to pull over and get some sleep before I passed out at the wheel. I was roughly 10 minutes away from my exit when the light mist that had slowly begun to form over the road turned into a fog that hung densely in the air, making it increasingly harder and harder to see what was ahead of me. I decided it would be safer to just take the next exit and pull over for the night instead of trying to drive through the fog. A quarter mile later, I saw the exit. I began slowing the truck as I turned off the highway and started to look for a spot where I could safely pull over and rest. There was something strange about the area I had exited at. There was nothing there. No gas stations, no streetlights, no houses, just emptiness. I pushed aside the weird feeling I had and just told myself that I was overthinking the situation. I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere, so I guess it's not that strange that there wasn't anything around me. I figured I had just pulled over into a farming area, and that was why there seemed to be nothing around me. The fog also didn't help my case, as I was only able to see what my headlights showed me. I gradually slowed the truck and pulled over off the road. I turned the ignition off and unbuckled my seatbelt, feeling the waves of fatigue rush over me as I drew the curtains on my windows and climbed into the back of the cab to get ready for bed. I brushed my teeth and crawled into bed. Within a matter of seconds, I was out cold. It was pretty odd that I was able to fall asleep so quickly since, like I mentioned before, I usually have trouble getting more than an hour's rest on these trips. I had been asleep for maybe 3 hours when something jolted me awake. I woke up so abruptly that I was disoriented. I fumbled around in the bed for my phone and clicked it on, reading the time, 2:40. I rubbed my eyes and groaned, now knowing there was no way I would be able to fall back asleep. I wasn't even sure what had woken me up when I felt it. The truck cab rocked side to side, almost as if a strong gust of wind were pushing it. I slid out of bed and started to walk toward the window to look out so I could confirm my suspicion when it happened again. The truck rocked a little more violently this time, causing me to stumble in my cramped cab. Now my mind was racing. There's no way the wind is this strong, I thought to myself. I would hear it blowing around me. I got to the passenger side window and drew the curtain back, staring out into the darkness. I couldn't see anything since the fog was so heavy, so I reached into my glove compartment and got out my flashlight. I clicked it on and pointed it out of my passenger side window, slowly sweeping it along the side of the truck. Nothing, just fog and grass. I then moved to the driver's side window and pulled back the curtain. At first I saw nothing, but as I swept the light toward the back of the truck, I thought I saw a car pulled off onto the side of the road parked behind me. I wasn't 100% sure of what I saw, so I slowly rolled down the window and poked my head out, giving me a better view behind my truck. Now I was certain. There was an old car parked about 10 yards behind my truck. Its lights were off, and from what I could see, it seemed unoccupied. This sent my head into a spiral. Was that car there the whole time? Did I just miss it because the fog was so dense? Or did it drive up behind me after I had pulled over to park? As I looked back at the car thinking, I felt the familiar jolt of the truck beginning to sway back and forth again. Now I was sure it wasn't the wind. I quickly jumped across the cab to the passenger side, shining my light out of the window when I saw it. The figure quickly running around the backside of the truck, disappearing from my sight. It was brief, but I knew what I saw. My heart was now pounding as I knew there was something out there in the darkness. Before I had a chance to process what was happening, I heard the sound of the lock on my driver's side door clicking. As I whipped my head around, I saw a dirty arm reaching up through my window, pulling up on the manual lock. I screamed and scrambled across the seats, trying to push it back down. Before I made it, the door swung open, and I was met with a homeless-looking man pulling himself upwards into the cab. My instincts kicked in, and I swung my flashlight at him, catching him on the right side of the head. The hit stunned him, causing him to fall backwards. His left hand was still gripping the frame of my door, and without a second thought, I brought the metal flashlight down onto them, causing him to let out a yell and lose his grip. He fell backwards, landing flat on his back. I grabbed my open door handle, yanking it shut and locking it as quickly as I could. As I cranked the window up, I saw the man stagger to his feet and reach behind his back, pulling out what looked like a miniature baseball bat. He then charged the truck, grabbing my side mirror and using it to pull himself back up towards me. My window was nearly shut when he swung the bat at it. The crack was so loud I thought he had shattered the window, but the bat bounced off. The window finally shut, and the man was now swinging the bat repeatedly, beating the window while screaming that he was going to kill me. My heart was beating so fast I thought it was going to explode. I looked around frantically for my keys before spotting them sitting on the dashboard. I grabbed them, shoving them into the ignition and firing up the engine. I threw the truck into gear and slammed on the gas, causing the truck to lurch forward. As I was steering onto the road, the man hadn't stopped smashing my window with the bat and screaming obscenities at me the entire time. With each crack, I was more and more scared the window would give out and shatter, but thankfully it held up to the beating. I was flooring the truck, just trying to go fast enough that the man would let go, but he held on. Through the fog, I saw the entrance ramp to the highway, and I punched it, pushing the accelerator as far down as it would go. I looked out the window at the man, screaming at him to let go. In the dim light, I could make out his haggard face. He looked to be in his 30s, with wild hair and eyes so wide it looked like they might pop out of his head. I was now entering the highway, the man still clinging to my door, beating it repeatedly when I made a decision that may have saved my life. I reached over to the door, unlocking it and swinging it open with all of my strength. As it swung open, the man swung with it, sending him flying off of the truck and into the grass that lined the side of the road. In one fluid motion, I whipped the door open and then slammed it shut. I looked out the window and didn't see him. I then looked into my side mirror and saw him in the distance behind the truck, sprinting on the road behind me, waving the bat in the air above his head. I got onto the highway and continued looking in my side mirror until he had disappeared from my view. Now I could breathe. My heart was slamming in my chest and my mind was racing. What just happened? I couldn't believe the last 5 minutes had been real. It felt like a dream to me. As I drove down the road, my nerves began to calm and I started to think, do I call the police? What would I even say if I called? A random homeless man tried to break into my truck? I wasn't even sure the police existed this far out in the country. I then thought about the attack. Why did it happen? Why did he target me? Nothing made sense. Then it clicked. This guy wanted to rob me. He had probably seen my truck on the side of the road and thought he could rob whoever was in it. He pushed on the sides of the cab, rocking it back and forth, hoping to wake up whoever was inside, hoping they would step out of the truck to check what was wrong, and in the fog he could sneak up and hit them with his bat. This was the most likely explanation I could come up with because nothing else I thought of made any sense. I had gotten lucky that I saw him running behind my truck, or I may have fallen for his trap. I ended up not calling the police and driving through the night to my drop-off location. After dropping that load, I took a few weeks off from driving for my own sanity. I drove trucks for a few more years after this before moving on to a different job, but I can confidently say I never slept in the back of that truck again. When I was younger, one of my favorite things to do was hop in my car and drive up the coast to my best friend Michael's house. We lived in California at the time, and for those of you that have lived there before, you'll know about Big Sur. It is one of the most incredible highways to drive on because of the views you get of the ocean. With rolling ocean cliffs and the smell of salt in the air, nothing is better than opening all your windows in your car, putting on your favorite song, and flying down the coastline. It was Friday afternoon, and Michael and I had planned to hang out that weekend. I packed up my car with all the things I would need for the weekend and hopped on the road. It was around a 3-hour drive from my place to Michael's, so I had some time to burn before I got there. I was super into the band Def Leppard, so I threw on one of my favorite albums and started cruising along the highway. It's so scenic it almost makes you feel like you're in a movie. I couldn't help but smile as I felt the wind in my hair, the sun on my face, and the familiar smell of the ocean as I drove through the winding cliffs. The sun was slowly setting, and it cast a golden glow over the ocean. I was honestly just happy to be getting away for the weekend, because Michael and I live so far apart, but we didn't get to hang out all that often, so it was always a good time when we met up. We were planning to go to the skate park together, and then go to the movies afterward. This was a pretty standard thing for us to do, since we were both really into skating at the time. We were always watching Thrasher skate videos, and our favorite game was Skate 2. We would spend hours in Michael's room just drinking beer and taking turns on skate, trying to top each other's runs. Anyway, I was about an hour away from Michael's house now, and the sun had completely set, casting the highway into darkness. There was a full moon that night, so it lit up the highway ahead of me, making it pretty easy to see far into the distance. There were a few cars that passed ever so often, but for the most part it was a pretty quiet night. I was coming around a bend in the road when, in the distance, I saw a car with its hazard lights on. The car was a small white sedan that was sitting at an angle in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes so no cars from either way could get around it without driving off onto the shoulder. I began to slow down so I could safely drive around it when I saw the driver's side door open and a lady step out onto the road. She began waving her hands above her head, signaling for me to slow down. At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but after looking back at this experience, this should have been my first warning to keep my foot on the gas and speed around the car. I slowed down to a complete stop, about 10 feet away from the stopped car, as the lady walked up to my window smiling. "Thank God you stopped. I've been stuck here for the past 30 minutes. My tire blew out and I lost control of my car. I nearly flew over the edge of the cliff." She didn't sound frantic. She was very controlled and matter-of-fact, almost like the way a lawyer speaks. As I looked up at her, I realized she was a lot older than I had previously thought as I drove up. The way she dressed made her look 20 years younger than she actually was. She had to be at least 40 years old. Obviously, I didn't ask her this, but just the wrinkles on her face and the way she talked made me think she was around that age. She had long blonde hair and tan skin, like she had spent her entire life at the beach. She was wearing a pair of black Vans, tight blue jeans, and a red crop top tank top. She leaned down, resting her arms on my door, bringing her eyes level with mine, and then with a smile she asked if I could help her change her tire. I'm not really sure if I could help you. I've never changed a tire before." I lied to her, because I didn't exactly feel like getting out and spending the next 20 minutes changing this random lady's tire. She gave me a pouty look and said, "Please, can you help me? I'll even pay you for the trouble." Against my better judgment, I told her yes, I would help her out. I guess I just felt bad for her. I mean, she was stuck in the middle of the highway at night, and it was pretty dangerous for other drivers too. The way she was parked could have easily caused an accident if someone came around the corner too fast and wasn't looking. I turned my car off and opened my door. As I stood up, the lady smiled and said, "Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver." I offered her a smile back and told her it was no problem. I was happy to help. She spun around and walked back to her car, climbing into the driver's seat. I followed her over to where she sat and asked her which one of her tires was flat. She didn't respond. It was at this point that I began to get a weird feeling. Her smile had disappeared from her face and her bubbly personality was gone. She was coldly staring over her shoulder towards the woods on the right side of the road. I asked her again which tire was flat. I was getting pretty annoyed at this point since I was going out of my way to help this lady and she was just completely ignoring me. Her head snapped back towards me and then looked at me with cold eyes and said, "The back one." Now my adrenaline was beginning to pump. Just the way she was acting was a little weird, but her complete change of tone was really throwing me off. I began to walk towards the back of her car, which was angled towards the woods, so I could check which one of her back tires was flat, since she wasn't telling me, when it all happened at once. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement in the tree line and quickly looked up as a large man wearing all black emerged out of the trees in a full-on sprint. Then from behind me, I felt a pair of arms wrap around my neck and begin to squeeze, making it hard for me to breathe. The woman was trying to drag me down to the ground as the man sprinted towards us. "Hurry," I heard her scream at the man from behind me. I could feel her breath on my neck as she screamed, and the smell of her disgusting cigarette breath flooded my nose. I struggled against her and was able to pry her arms off of my neck. I threw my head backwards, slamming it into her face and knocking her off balance, giving me enough time to free myself from her grasp. Just as I turned and began sprinting towards my car, I felt a stronger set of hands grab the back of my t-shirt. The man was now right on top of me, and he pulled at my shirt, trying to drag me back towards him. I screamed at the man to get off of me, but he continued to pull. He used his right hand to grab my shoulder and pull me back towards him. I was thrashing around, pulling away from him as best as I could, but this guy was at least 6 inches taller than me and 50 pounds heavier. He now had both arms wrapped around my chest and was pulling me backwards toward their car. I was screaming for my life, begging him to leave me alone, when the lady from before yelled at the man that there was a car coming. As I looked up toward the direction my car was parked, I saw a pair of headlights driving around the bend coming straight towards us. I had never been so grateful to see another car in my entire life. "Shit," I heard the man say, his voice deep and rough. He held on to me for a few seconds more until the car closed in on us, now maybe 50 yards away. The man pulled his right arm off of me and swung it, hitting me hard on the back of my head before letting go of me and shoving me to the ground. I heard their car fire up and the sound of 2 doors slamming shut, then the squeal of tires as they sped away in the opposite direction. Then another car door opened. "Are you okay?" I heard a man this time, and the sound of footsteps running toward me. I lifted my head from the pavement, looking up as a young guy in a suit ran up to me. He asked again if I was okay, and I nodded slowly. The shock of what had just happened hadn't worn off yet, and I was still dazed from getting hit by that guy. I sat up on the pavement as the guy shined his phone's flashlight, examining the back of my head for any blood. "I saw him hit you. Do you know those people?" I told him I didn't. He then called 911, telling them where we were on the highway and what had just happened. He asked me if I needed EMS, but I told him I was fine, just a little bruised. My adrenaline was pumping so hard at this point I could have been bitten by a shark and probably wouldn't have felt it. The man on the phone then asked me what they were driving. I told him it was a white sedan, an Audi, with a woman driving and a man with her. The man put the phone on speaker so I could describe what the woman looked like. I told them I couldn't give a description of the man because he was wearing all black, but I told them he was probably 6'5", 200 pounds. The dispatcher told me she had police coming to our location, as well as officers coming from the direction the man and woman drove off in. The man in the suit, who later told me his name was Wells, sat with me until the police arrived. I then gave a statement to an officer while Wells did the same thing, telling them he saw the man holding on to me as I struggled to get away, and then how the man hit me and shoved me to the ground. The officers radioed back and forth to one another, giving updates as to where they were on the highway and if they had seen the car the pair drove off in, when I finally heard an officer come over the radio saying they had the car in their sights. I wanted them caught. It made me mad to think that they could have done what they did to me and get away with it. I then heard the car was pulled over and that the officers were approaching the vehicle. Thankfully, the pair were both arrested and didn't put up a fight. When the officers asked me if I wanted to press charges, I said yes. I wanted them to pay for what they had done to me. I ended up calling Michael and explaining the situation. After he made sure I was okay, he told me he would drive to me and follow me back to his place to make sure I was all right. All in all, we actually had a pretty fun weekend together. It helped me take my mind off of what had just happened to me on the highway. Looking back on this experience, my biggest takeaway was to never ignore my gut feeling. There were too many times that I knew I should have gotten out of that situation, but I stayed, telling myself I was just paranoid. It creeps me out knowing her plan all along was to kidnap me. I'm not sure what they were going to do to me after they took me, but honestly, I don't think I want to know. I'm just happy to be alive and to be able to share my story so that maybe I can prevent someone else out there from getting into a bad situation.